Hi there, Mr. Sapora here again, and we're going to continue with ecology this week. Okay, nuts and bolts. I posted 2 assignments this week on Google Classroom, so the assignment that we're going to be focusing on in this one is going to be just the ecology notes and lecture. I have the notes posted here. It's a note sheet you fill out. It's double-sided, so there's 2 pages. It's a little more in-depth this week than what we did last week. And I posted the presentation as well. We're going to be going over slides 15 through 35 today, so 20 slides this week. So again, more content this week. And then we have a short video on plankton that I found from a larger video. It's 2 minutes long. You're going to have to pause it and wind it back in a couple places. And I have a Google form with some questions that pertain to that video. Make sure your answers in that Google form are on topic and detailed. We're also going to have a quiz at the end of the week this week on Friday, and I'll be using Socrative for that, the one we use in the classroom all the time. It'll be an online quiz. I'll talk more with you about that at our Monday class meeting, and that will be on Friday. I will launch the quiz, and you will go online and take it. It'll be live, and I'll leave it up for most of the day, so you could log in with the class code and take that. All the instructions will be posted up here as well. And I have week 3's assignments already done. I just need to post those. It's going to be the same format we're going to be doing throughout this whole COVID experience that we're living through. So stay tuned, but expect more of the same. Lecture, notes, and then a Google form with some questions pertaining to a video as well there. And that will roll over into week 4 as well, with an assessment at the end of week 4. Okay, so here are the notes that you're going to be filling out this week. And it's in Google Docs. When you open it, it'll create one in your name. I gave points values to each of them, you can see here, and the amount of space I give you is kind of the amount of space I expect you to fill. So these need to be complete sentences and detailed answers. And here's the Google form that you will fill out from the video. I have a link to the video in the Google form, and also I think in the Google Classroom, and there's a link to it here as well. You can just click and play it. Okay, let's jump in and let's talk about ecology. We are going to be jumping in. Oh, there comes the sun. Okay, ecology. We are focusing on the flow of energy this week in this unit. So last week we just talked about basically what are the parts of an ecosystem, right? Okay, so the parts of an ecosystem that we talked about last week include what is ecology? Sorry. Ecology is the study of living things and how they interact with each other and their environment. So what are the different parts, of these ecosystems? We always tend to think of living things as just individuals, but we don't really look at them in bigger, in the bigger picture of how things actually operate in nature. We tend to be very individualistic, and being American, everyth's about the individual there. But really, in biology and in the world, right around me and behind me, individuals don't matter so much as the larger groupings of things, such as populations, right? Groups of related individuals, right? Of the same species interacting with each other. And with this coronavirus thing, we're seeing, this roll out on a population sense. And then communities, groups of different living things, populations of different living things, all having to share space and interact, and they divide up the ecosystem accordingly, and that includes the plants as well. Plants often get left out, and they are the most important thing out there, and the most numerous. And you can hear a lot of birds around me right now, but if you look behind me, you see a lot of plants. Okay. And all of those things, the individuals, the populations, the communities, make up the ecosystems, right? A community of organisms. And, of course, we have to add in the physical environment, because that shapes and dictates really everything. You need to have water. You need to have sunlight. You need to have some form of nutrients, be that soil, rock, or in the ocean. It's just, silt and nitrogen and other things that get brought in from land. And then temperature needs to be right. It can't be too hot or too cold. Otherwise, you boil alive or you freeze to death. Bummer. Okay. So we talked about the abiotic factors, those non-living things that shape ecosystems, and we're just going to go over what they are in our notes here today. So abiotic factors are the non-living physical forces of the universe. If I reach down here, got a handful of rocks. things like that. It's what plants grow on. Looking behind me, you've got sunlight and air to breathe. There's water, and there's all kinds of other things that go into shaping the ecosystem. And those abiotic factors that I just mentioned are in order of importance, really, I would think. Water. You got to have water for life. All living things require water. Where there is no water, there's no life, as far as we know it. And here on Earth, that is true. Okay. It has to be the right temperature. Too hot, too cold, you just don't have living things. You go down to Antarctica, there's water, it's frozen as ice, and just nothing living there because it's too cold for metabolic processes, homeostasis, and all those other things. You need some form of energy and sunlight. And lastly, you need some type of soil and nutrients for things to grow. There's more than just carbon dioxide and water that goes into living things. There's nitrogen that's just in DNA, right, and in amino acids and proteins, and it has to come from somewhere. So it starts in the soil, and then for us, we get our nutrients not from soil. Most of us don't eat rocks, but we get it from the plants that eat the soil, in a sense. And water and temperature at the top here, put those at the top as well, because those vary and change the most as we move around the planet. So here's just some visuals to kind of give you examples. You've got water, temperature. Again, soil nutrients are vitally important, and then the amount of light you get also plays a role, sunlight. And in our forest, sunlight does play a large role because there's such competition for it. The trees here grow really well. We have a lot of water. The temperature is not too hot, it's not too cold, right? It doesn't boil in the summer, and we don't get covered in snow and ice in the winter. Only maybe, we get lucky if we get one snow day. And the soil here is pretty rich. It's a lot of sandstone and volcanic rock, but that's good for plants. And so everything grows really well here, and grows so well that it shades everything out down below, and there's competition for sunlight. Okay. Boop, ba-da-boo. Here's a picture that I took over in Dinosaur National Monument in Utah. And just an awesome environment. And the limiting factor here, which one of these do you think would be the most limiting in this area, or the one that things have to fight and scrap over? There's a lot of good rock there. It's all sandstone as well, ample amount of sunlight. The temperature's pretty warm. It's water, not a lot of water there. Okay, so water has the biggest impact on the environment there, and it really shapes that ecosystem. So the abiotic factors shape an ecosystem. Ecosystems are shaped by these non-living factors, and just looking at Oregon here, you can see examples of the different ecosystems that exist just within our state alone. You've got the high Cascade Mountains here, the alpine areas. Now you may think this is high Cascades over here, but this is actually Southern Oregon serpentine forest, and this is probably shot at an elevation, this photo, of 3,000 feet, which you can look behind us and see forest-covered ridges at that elevation. It's just the nutrients are lacking. We got ocean environments. And then we have the Eastern Oregon desert, we have the coastal sand dunes, and we have our coastal forests, temperate rainforest as well. All of these are shaped by different abiotic factors throughout our state, either variance in soil or in water or in temperature or in some combination of. Okay. Every ecosystem on Earth starts with producers. Autotrophs. So your producers are your primary producers. These are organisms that make their own chemical energy, photosynthesis, out of the sun's electromagnetic energy. So they take physical energy, energy in this form, electromagnetic, something that's on the move, that's going, and they turn it into chemical energy. They store it as sugar in their leaves. And most can make this through photosynthesis, and the end product of what they're making is what we call glucose. It's sugar, C6H12O6. Know your CHO. What's up, CHO? CHO. As we're going to talk about today, there's more producers than anything else on Earth as far as living things. Looking down here from space at the Amazon rainforest in South America, right? We're way up here. Down below us, it's the largest rainforest on Earth, and you can see the primary producers. Right? You can see life from space. You can see the forest, but you just don't look down and see animals. Animals are less abundant, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. So these producers, their job in an ecosystem is to, through photosynthesis, make sugar and food and chemical energy for the rest of all the living things to basically feed off. And this is a map just showing primary production around the planet. The green on land is the highest production, and then the tan is the lowest production. And this really has to do with variances in those abiotic factors. Okay, let's let's get into it. The next level up in an ecosystem are the consumers, heterotrophs. And these are organisms that obtain their energy from other organisms. So you've got producers at the base, kind of, making all the food. And again, if you look around us, you'll see behind me, I got a bunch of producers, and there's consumers out here. I'm one of them. I got some birds talking to me over here. They are consumers as well. And consumers, or heterotrophs, again, get their energy from other things. They consist of animals and fungi. All animals and fungus are considered consumers. They have to get their energy from somewhere else. And then these single-celled protistas, bacteria, and archaea, some of those are consumers, some of those are producers. There's variation in those groups. Okay, and if we were to look at an ecosystem going from the sun to the plant, the consumers are over here. In case you didn't realize that. Okay. All living organisms require a constant supply of energy to stay alive. We knew that, right? All living things are made of cells. They have DNA, and they need energy, use energy. Here on Earth, that source of energy is the sun. And producers make their own food through photosynthesis from this sunlight and turn it into sugar, chemical energy. They take CO2 and H2O, which exist here as gas and water, carbon dioxide on Earth, and they turn it into actual sugar. They take gas and water and they turn it into something solid. Right here, plants that other things can eat. And consumers are those organisms that then obtain their energy from those producers. They eat those things. My head's in a thing of sugar there. Sweet. Okay, and bringing this all back around now, we're going to start talking about how all this works out, how that flow of energy works in an ecosystem. Now we understand the parts. You've got your producers, you've got your consumers, your producers produce stuff, your consumers consume stuff. Great. But in ecology, it's not just interesting what things do. We're interested in interactions, right? So one of the main interactions is, of course, consumerism, right? Predation. Things that eat other things. When we watch nature shows, this is generally what they tend to focus on. So one way to represent who eats who in an ecosystem and to kind of see how all things are connected is by creating these food chains or food webs. They show how consumers interact at different levels with each other and also with producers as well. And it shows the flow of energy and matter through an ecosystem. Where does it start? In each one of these, I think you can kind of see where it starts, right? It starts down here with your producers, and then it moves up through different levels of consumers. Okay, so food chains are linear. They show just one after the other after the other. It's a really clean, linear succession of who eats who from a single producer on up through each different level of consumer. And it's a real clear way of understanding what is happening. But it's what's happening in that one instance. A food web shows all the different relationships within an ecosystem. And so they show all these different intersections, and you can really see that some things become very important. Look down here, copepods, right in the middle. How many different lines or food chains could you make out of these, right? You could pull out all these chains out of this food web. So a web is made up of different chains. And things that intersect the most are the most important. In the ocean, copepods are by far the most abundant animal out there. Actually, probably the most abundant animal on Earth. They're like the little microscopic cows of the sea. They graze on all the phytoplankton, and everything else eats them. So if it wasn't for copepods, we wouldn't have things like salmon or whales or tuna or anything else, really. Anything else we could see. Okay, here's an example of a food web. This is from East Elementary School. I took this photo last year, I believe. And again, looking for those one little species that kind of everything kind of hinges on or intersects with in an ecosystem. Caterpillars. And you think, never really thought they were that important. But if you took out the caterpillar, look at how many things would fall off here, how many things depend on them. Right, things you don't even think about really being important to caterpillars, relying on them, like a raccoon or a bear. Even if you move on down the chain, you see that they intersect caterpillars somewhere along the way, and they're an important part and component of the ecosystem, what we call a keystone species. Okay. A food chain or food web, the different levels are, in a food chain or food web, different levels, just a vocab word you need to know because I'm going to use it, are called trophic levels. Trophic means food or nourishment, okay? So each level is like a feeding level, right? So the first level is your first trophic level, is always made up of primary producers. Primary producers are the base of everything in an ecosystem. If nothing is produced, nothing can be consumed. So you have to have the primary producers. And on land, they're plants. In the ocean, they're phytoplankton, dinoflagellates, diatoms, radiolarians. There's a whole bunch of different types of those. But those are your producers on land. Of course, it's plants. And then you get your consumers, so your second trophic level, your third trophic level, your fourth, and on up to your fifth. My question I'm going to pose to you is, why are there only 5 trophic levels? Why doesn't it go 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and just keep going to infinity? We'll find out. Okay. The first trophic level, as I just said, is always made up of autotrophs and producers. You have to produce something in order for it to be consumed. And again, producers' job is what they do is they convert light energy into chemical energy, glucose, for everybody else to consume. And they're always at the first trophic level. On land, it can be plants. In the ocean, it's phytoplanktons and algae. Second trophic level is made up of consumers, and specifically, the second trophic level is made up of what we would call herbivores, things that eat those producers. So consumers at the second trophic level are herbivores or decomposers. They can be bacteria or worms and things like that, right? Worms are really an herbivore. They're just eating dead grass that falls down and kind of rots into the soil. Consumers at higher trophic levels, right? At your third trophic level, you call these secondary consumers because they're the second level of consumer, third in the chain, blah, blah, blah. These are either carnivores or omnivores, right? They may eat a little bit of each, but as you move up, they tend to be carnivores, right, at these tertiary, quaternary, or fourth, fifth levels. So maximum number of levels you can find in here. Well, if we were to really just count in a food chain, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, there's 5 levels here, and then it stops. If we were to go this way, and we don't count the sun because it's not a living thing, but the sun provides the energy to producers produce it, and then we start transferring the energy from there. I could go maybe, let's try this one. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 here max before it stops moving. So why does the energy stop moving? Why does it cap out at the top? Why is there a top? So the last thing we're going to talk about today in an ecosystem, and this really brings it all together and makes sense of it. So this is important stuff to understand, and it will kind of make sense of a lot of the world around you once you do understand this. Okay, why when I look around my yard right now, do I see a lot of plants everywhere? Okay, mostly though, I'm seeing plants. If you look down from space, you see plants. If you look up at the hills in the distance, you see plants, right? If we saw a hill just covered in bears, it'd be scary. So why? Why is it we see plants? Well, food chains and food webs really don't explain that, right? You see them at the bottom, but what does explain it, or what does show it, is these things called energy pyramids or ecological pyramids. So an ecological pyramid places organisms in the different trophic levels where they feed or exist, but it also demonstrates how much energy is available at each trophic level. So the amount of energy available at each trophic level is demonstrated by this. And there's some basic math that we can do. There's some modeling that's been done around this that sort of explains it. So energy is passed up the food chain from one trophic level to the next. It starts with the producers, but after that it's being consumed, right? Grasshoppers aren't making energy, they're taking energy. The birds that eat the grasshoppers, again, are not producers, they're consumers. They're consuming the grasshoppers. And then the owls that eat those birds are then consuming, right, them, right? And in the sense, they're all consuming the energy that started at the grass. So energy is passed up from one trophic level to the next. If it wasn't for the grass, there wouldn't be grasshoppers, there wouldn't be birds, there wouldn't be owls, there wouldn't be anything going on here except to be a bare rock, and it would look like one of the moons of Saturn. But how much energy, right, is passed up at each level? You can see that there's less energy at each level, right? And we can just do some basic math here, and this kind of shows it. If we have 1,000 calories of grass, that supports about 1,000 calories of grasshopper. That then supports about 100 calories of birds. That then supports about 10 calories of owl. So that reduction from 10,000 to 1,000 is 10%. Okay, if you multiplied 1,000 by 10, you'd get 10,000. That reduction for birds then is another 10%, right? Only about 10% reduction. That what energy being passed along is only about 10%, right? So only about 10%. So 100 calories is available for the birds out of the 1,000 calories that grasshoppers have to sustain them. So we lose about 90% at each level, and only 10% is passed along. So why do we stop at owls? Because we run out of something. We run out of energy. So the total energy stored in organisms is actually transferred to organisms at the next level. Okay, so only about 10% of the total energy stored is transferred. So if I ate 1,000 calories today, what would be available if someone came and predated upon me? Decided that I was going to be consumable. They wouldn't get all those 1,000 calories that I ate today. Why? Why not? Well, I ate 1,000 calories. Why isn't that available to a lion that comes and eats me, or a bear, right, or a zombie? And the reason being is that, well, at each level and throughout my day, I'm burning up about 90% of that energy. Energy is used for metabolic processes. My battery's about to die. Energy is used for metabolic processes. So let's make sure I'm still recording. Looks Gucci. And the energy is used or it's lost as heat. All right. I think that's all I need to say there. I got a few different examples. I'm going to run inside and plug this in. So I'm walking. I got a few different examples here that you can kind of see for an energy pyramid. So you start with your producers. You get 100% energy. Your primary consumer, the next level up, which consists of herbivores, only has about 10% of the energy from that first level. And then the secondary consumers, you get about 1% of that energy that's available at that level. And then after that, we've got about 0.1%. And then for your apex predators, right, if we're going to move up 4 levels, consumers, 5 levels total, and about 0.01%. So there's just not a lot of energy left for anybody in that ecosystem. They have to move too far, too wide, just to find food. And this is true for what we know for apex predators. They cover huge territories just to be successful. A mountain lion can wander 15 miles a day. I read somewhere that a wolverine can wander up to 30 miles in a single day looking for food. So there you go. Whereas a deer doesn't have to wander very far because it's down here lower, and there's a lot more abundance of that energy available to them. So another way to think about this, and a better example, is this energy pyramid. I like this one because it's more sized correctly. So at the bottom in the ocean, you have a ton of phytoplankton, but that is only going to produce about this much of the herbivores, the zooplankton, those little copepods. We think of them as little tiny shrimp that feed on those. That's only going to, in turn, support larger shrimp that are going to feed on those. It's a much smaller amount. And then larger fish. So your mid-level carnivorous fish, and these would be things like salmon or tuna or even rockfish. And then things that eat those fish that prey on them, sharks, right? This is how much you would see in biomass. And by biomass, I mean actual weight of sharks in the ocean. So it takes this much plankton to support this much shark. So sharks are a lot less numerous. We don't see them, obviously. Pretty rare to see a shark out in the ocean, which is a good thing. But it's pretty common to see fish, and it's even more common if you really look to see plankton. It's just everywhere at every drop of water. Okay, and that is it. We are done. So go ahead and just review this. Look this amazing presentation over again if you want. Share it with your family. Follow me on YouTube and Twitter. I'm kidding. I don't twit. And have a great day. Laters.